Hey, what's up, guys? It's ex-mormon here. Today I have an awesome guest with me. It is my very good friend and business partner, Angie Monko from Harmony Harbor in St. Louis. Yay!
Hey.
Thank you for being here with me today, Angie. I've been wanting to get Angie on this channel for a while now because she has some really cool experiences in her business. She's been life coaching for years, and she's actually coached Mormons, also Jehovah's Witnesses who have left, and an ex-Scientologist, right? So there's a lot of experience there, and I wanted to be able to talk with you about kind of, how do these all play out? Like, how are they so, the people and what it's like, and I know you've coached both Mormons and also me, who was Mormon but then became ex-Mormon. Anyways, there's so much. But before we get started in all of that, I did want to tell you guys a little bit about how me and Angie met and how she influenced my, belief system in a lot of ways. And she didn't do it like, she never said to me like, oh, Mormonism is wrong or whatever. Like, it was never like that. It was like her teaching me to love and accept myself made me realize something wasn't right. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So just a little bit about how we met. Did you want to mention, so you met my mom first. Did you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I met her mom many years ago, and we were in a group called BNI, Business Network International, and we just really hit it off. I met her, and she was so cool. She still is cool, and I just thought she was very loving, very open-minded, and she just wanted to improve. She just wanted to become more of a loving self-advocate. And so we started working together, and then she introduced me to her family, and I met, and during that, I guess, period of working with her, she met her husband, and then he brought his family into the equation. So there's a family of 10 now. Mm-hmm. And so I just got to know a lot of them, and on a very intimate basis, and I just really fell in love with her family. And then I met Morgan, and we started coaching together about 3 years ago, I guess. And yeah. It's just been an honor.
Thank you. Yeah, and our whole family loves you as well. So we had met, but then I remember, so it was 2016. It was fall, and I had just graduated college at BYUI, and I was like feeling very stuck. I was feeling very unhappy, like, because I had graduated college, but like my degree was in applied mathematics. So I really needed to go to grad school, but like with money and stuff and where we were living and Jared's job, I was feeling very stuck. And I was dealing with a lot, and I was calling my mom up crying a lot. And finally my mom was like, you just need Angie in your life. And then I started, I hired you as my coach. And from there is interesting because, so much of what I feel like we worked on, like I kind of mentioned earlier, was all about teaching me to let go of the perfectionism, to let go of the people pleasing, and to just like trust myself and love myself. And that was like, what? My brain was like, what is this?
And why was that so foreign to you?
It was so foreign to me because I believe I was influenced by the church and by my family and the dynamics there to think that love was supposed to be conditional upon being perfect and upon and so I think it was so interesting. And I remember thinking this, like, I remember when you started coaching with me, feeling like this whole pull to like feel good about myself was like changing my life in magnificent ways. And I remember feeling like, oh my gosh, like I'm feeling like good, like what is this? Like, and I remember feeling like, oh my gosh, like I don't hate myself. But then I also remember this is a funny thought, but I remember thinking to myself, this stuff Angie's teaching me is so helpful, this self-acceptance stuff. And I was like, if I'm in the true church, why are we not taught that at church?
Right.
it was a total cognitive dissonance thing though. And I remember even feeling bad, like, well, shouldn't the church be enough? But the
Right.
church was perpetuating, at least in my experience, it was perpetuating a lot of mistrust in myself and a lot of like, kind of boxed in thinking and feeling and trying to present perfectness to everyone. And so anyway, it was just so interesting, like how you never really bashed the church, but in you teaching me to love myself, it started me thinking like, wait a second, this doesn't make sense. And I'll even say one more thing about that is that I always viewed God as like someone who is really harsh. And now I never thought I did, but I did in some ways. And as I started to pull away from that and I started to actually like myself, then I started to pull away from some of the rules at church that didn't make sense to me. So for example, you're not supposed to drink coffee or tea according to the word of wisdom through the LDS church. And in my mind, it was like, wait a second, why would God care if someone drink coffee or tea? I don't know. And maybe he does. Right. I'm not here to say, but it doesn't make sense. It started to not make sense, even though you never directly were like, that doesn't make sense. You know what I mean?
Right. Yes, because I remember when we were working together, like I not once would ever say, don't be a Mormon, right? I was never against any religion. And even with the other religions that I've worked with people, it was never my intention to help or to try to get someone to be against their church or to leave their church. Just like I do, like I don't have any intention to have someone leave a marriage that they're in, right? I don't care about being against anything. I'm more about being pro you, pro authenticity, just being yourself without the mask, without the exhaustion, to be yourself would ideally be a fun endeavor. It would be joyful and expressive without fear of, well, what's everyone going to think of me if I express this or that? And like you, Morgan, I grew up Christian, but I grew up in a church where God was pretty loving, right? That was my experience in the church. But yet, even with that, we bring to the table our experiences like with our parents and so forth. And so for me, my dad was very critical. And so in my mind as a child, I viewed God, and I didn't realize this till much later, I thought God was like a critical father. And so in my mind, I had to revamp that relationship with God, with a higher power, however I wanted to define that. And I did that through 12-step work. So I was in a 12-step program called Overeaters Anonymous. So it was an offshoot of Alcoholics Anonymous and that. And I learned that God doesn't have to be that critical father role. It can be more of a loving parent or a loving mother. And so we got to define that however we wanted to. I didn't even know I was going to bring that up, but it came up because that's how I grew up. And so I started to shift that definition of my higher power to a loving, supportive creator.
That is so beautiful. That is so beautiful. Yeah. And I know like for people who experience this kind of faith transition, it makes you feel like you can't trust God anymore. Like you don't know if he's there or if he's like trustworthy. Like you don't know what to rely on anymore. But I think that's so cool that it was like for you and your experience, like you realized that your definition of God was not like fitting with what you wanted, and you said, you know what, this needs to change, and like you redefine that yourself. I think that's beautiful. That's awesome.
That served me and allowed me, this is the irony of it, that when we start to see the creator, the source, or whatever you want to call it, I like to use Robert Scheinfeld's term, true creative essence, that true creative essence is friendly and supportive. That was a huge paradigm for me, that no matter what's going on in my outer experience of life, that I am always loved and supported. And that really helped me a great deal with everything in my life, my relationships, with everything, with money, you name it, with my health.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. Yeah, and I also wanted to note a big part of how we came together, like something that really bonded us, was your daughter, and
yes.
And how I don't want to get emotional if I talk about this, and that's okay. So Angie's daughter, Maddie, she was my age, and we were really good friends because, you know, both of our families are friends together. And Maddie was born with cystic fibrosis. And so she actually just passed last October. And so that, like, me losing my good friend, her losing her daughter, like, we bonded over that, especially because of how traumatic it was. And it was, I mean, just, oh, the emotions around this. And so when we decided to start working together, we thought, I mean, this is what we want. We want to help people, because Maddie would always say to Angie, why would you ever do something you don't want to do with your life? And she would always say that to you. And I just thought how powerful that was, because she had a different view of life, because she knew her time was shorter than most people's. And like, I feel like that was kind of like, that whole concept really fueled our desire to want to help people live their life authentically. Life is too short to be anything but yourself. And it's just so easy to get caught up in the fear of what everyone else thinks. And especially when you're going through a freaking faith crisis.
Yeah, it's so true. Maddie was 22, and she was an inspiration and a role model in so many ways of, you know, just being true to herself. And when you know that your time is limited, and she did, I mean, I didn't know that she'd be going that soon at all, but she knew, and she sensed it. And when you have that mentality, and we can all take on that mentality of like, today's the last day of my life. How would I really live if today was the last day of my life? We live differently, and you tend to, your priorities change, and you really focus in on, you know, how can I be me? How can I be true to myself? How can I really connect with others on a deep heart level? And so it shifts. And that's why we created the shift. It was really, Maddie inspired it, that, you know, when you go through a trauma of losing someone like that, someone who meant so much to you and you were so connected with, it changes your perception. It changes how you are going to view your future and how you want to create it. And to me, that and some other experiences really helped me to cut that pattern of people pleasing. And I don't care if it's people pleasing with the church or with your husband or, you know, with your children, whoever, it doesn't matter. You're with your business network, but it really helped interrupt that pattern. So I'm definitely not against any religion. I'm pro authenticity. I'm pro being who you are.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. It feels, I don't know, it feels so good to get to, I don't know, to share you to my people, because you guys both mean so much to me. If that makes sense. My YouTube people and you.
Bridging the gap, right? Bridging the gap.
It feels very cathartic. I love it. So I want to talk a little bit about your experience. So obviously you coached with me. I was Mormon, and then I was ex-Mormon. And so that in itself, I'm sure you watching that transition must have been really fascinating from the outside. And do you remember, it was when I was at your retreat last October that I first called myself ex-Mormon. Do you remember that?
Yeah. Yes.
No, and do you remember? Oh my gosh, everyone needs to know this. I just remembered this. I had been feeling like called to do a vlog. Like this one we have right now. And I remember thinking to myself, no, I can't do that. Like, it's just like, it would be too much drama. I was right. It was too much drama. But at the retreat, I said nothing about it to you. And by the end, you said, Morgan, you need to share your story with people. Like, there's other people that feel the way you do. You said, have you thought about blogging? And I said, I want to vlog instead.
Yeah.
Literally, that's what started this channel. So that's so crazy. Anyway, okay, so your thoughts. So just initial thoughts on, maybe just a little bit about what it was like working with other Mormons or working with me as a Mormon and an ex-Mormon, and then we'll kind of compare that to the other people you worked with.
It really wasn't all that different from working with any of my clients in some ways. Not that you're not special, Morgan. It's just that it was the same process, right? I have a special place in my heart. Also for gays, lesbians, and the transgender community. I'm serious. Like, I have a special place because I always felt like I was sort of the odd duckling and that I didn't fit in places because I challenge the current status quo of things. I'm a seeker of truth. And what is truth? Well, it's your truth. It's not my truth. I'm a seeker of, I guess, authenticity. And I have always sort of been a renegade in some ways of questioning the current establishment, whatever that is. And so that's why I have this place in my heart for people who feel entrapped, ensnared to a belief system. And so I don't care what the belief system is, if it's keeping us stuck in this little box, almost like a glass box, because you can see outside of it, but yet you feel trapped nonetheless. So that's my passion, is help people outside of that, help them get freedom to be themselves, whatever that may look like. So the process with you was really just that. We didn't even talk in the first couple of years about Mormonism at all, right? I'm more about inclusivity and unity. Like, we're all one. We're really all the same. We're all connected and we're all one, than about bashing anything. Like, if we want peace, we don't want to be anti-war. Okay?
Yeah.
There's a difference. So that's my approach with people. And that's why I do attract. I've worked with gays, lesbians. I've worked with people who have left the Jehovah's Witness, who have left Scientology. And I think it's because we have a resonance together, that there's some sort of energy that they feel. And really, that energy is love. That energy is non-judgment. That energy is acceptance of where they're at, and that it's okay where they're at. And I help them to not resist where they're at.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's perfect. So I do have to ask this, because I'm curious. Like, when I would bring things up about Mormonism that just didn't make sense, like, to you,
right?
What were your thoughts?
Right.
Like, so for example, like the temple stuff or coffee and tea, things like that. Like, what were your thoughts about it? I'm just curious as an outsider, kind of.
Well, see, in my innocence, I'm like, well, wait a minute, I don't understand. Like, I would say that doesn't make sense. Or, for example, what really struck me as odd was that if we're going through a crisis in our life, some sort of, we're questioning our identity, like, who are we? And if we do something that we deem a mistake, then it seems to me that that's when our support system, our church or whatever that is, will come in, swoop in and say, well, let me help you. Let's talk about this. Let's get it out in the open. Let's share about it. But what really turned me to question, like, what? I don't get it. I don't understand that. It doesn't make sense. Mm-hmm. Is that when you shared some stories, I've worked with other Mormons, when they went through a difficult, trying time, that they had to confess that to their bishop. Mm-hmm. And if they didn't confess it, there would be dire consequences of being untruthful, right?
Yes.
But if they did confess it, that they were excommunicated.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, wait a minute, that's breeding lying. Like, that's encouraging being or dishonest, right? Because Absolutely. That's when we need our God the most, is when we're suffering, when we've made a mistake of some sort. We Absolutely. Need to be accepted and not rejected. Absolutely. That didn't make sense to me.
It does.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, it does kind of feel like a lose-lose situation, because if you're honest, you're going to be punished, and sometimes other people in the ward are going to know about it, which again, they try to keep it, secret. But I mean, if you have a certain calling and you have to suddenly be released or whatever, like it can be pretty apparent to people what's going on. And especially if you're excommunicated, because you're not even allowed to talk or pray or anything inside a church. So it's like, it feels like a lose-lose situation, because you get punished and everyone can see it, or you keep it all in and you feel awful. So it's just,
Right.
it is a crazy dynamic. Like, and I feel for people who struggle with that. You know what I mean?
And a dynamic that again breeds dishonesty. Now, I'm not saying that everybody's going to follow that path of feeling that guilt and shame, but it does tend to breed a feeling of guilt and shame. And whenever you've probably heard, "We're sick as our secrets." I don't know, that's just a phrase that goes around, that if we internalize everything, that it does tend to create dysfunction and disease, like actually disease in our body, because the body doesn't lie and it expresses itself and all that. Yeah. So I can't get behind that,
Yes,
so.
Absolutely. No, thank you for sharing your perspective on that, because it is always interesting to me to, just hear the outside perspective, because I know where I'm coming from, but I have, I mean, my background in it is just I'm so engrossed in it that it's like, sometimes it's hard to even just see things like from that perspective. So I'm curious, like, as a comparison, like, I know you said working with a Mormon or an ex-Mormon is no different than like working with someone else, because it's all about correcting belief systems, right? But right. I mean, right. were there certain particular similarities you noticed in working with ex-Mormons versus ex-Jehovah's Witness versus ex-Scientologists?
Yes, and even ex-Catholics. All right. Yes. And so the commonality that I saw was the guilt and the shame. Wow. The guilt and the shame was a commonality, because it bred this notion that they were intrinsically inferior, and that they were like a sinner, and that they didn't deserve to feel good about themselves, as like a loving self-advocate, which is what my message is all about. It's like, it's sort of that all or nothing thinking. My dog just walked in. Probably can't see him, but his name's Mars.
He said open doors, which is really cool.
Not a ghost. Kind of looks like
the door just opened. It's equally impressive if the door was opened by a dog or a ghost, I think.
So I don't know. Does that make sense, Morgan? It's that shame, that inferiority of like, I'm not worthy of happiness, of joy. And again, I'm not saying that that's what the intention of the church is, right? Right. It probably is. It's probably about love. But the truth is that the way people are, they'll interpret things in such a way that it just feels like they can never do enough. Never do enough. And that's that conditional love response. Like, well, if I perform, if I do good enough works, if I do enough works, that I will somehow be lovable and acceptable. Yeah. And that breeds a lot of shame and a lot of guilt.
Wow, that is so true. That feels good to me to hear. Like, I feel like a bond in this community of like anyone who's left their church or belief system that was somewhat maybe made them feel restrictive. And I feel a bond with them because we are all in the same boat. Like, we all are struggling to feel like we're trying to prove to everyone that we're good, and yet we don't believe it. Like, but we want to be good and we want to believe it, but it's like, we feel like we can't. I feel like in Mormonism in particular, obviously because that's my experience, I felt like there was so much like energy around like, you can't be, you have to be humble. Like, Jesus was humble, so you have to be humble. Like, and that emphasis on humility. I will say being humble is a very good thing, but I think any virtue taken to the extreme could be bad. Like, being humble in excess means we end up with the Mormons who are constantly shitting on themselves. And again, this is just my experience. Like, but I felt like I had to think I was bad in order to be good. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah. Selfflagellation comes to mind in the Christian, and humility truly is a good thing. But this is how I learned what humility is. It's neither placing yourself above or below anyone else's station in life. So it's not humiliation. It's really feeling like equal and on equal par with all of humanity. That's that oneness thing. right? It's not being better than or worse than. And the other thing that I just have to mention, because we were talking about shame and guilt,
Yeah.
is that there's something around this whole sex thing. And this is a big thing, and I know we don't have time to go into all that today, but
Yeah.
a commonality, right? That
Right.
almost like being a sexual being is a shameful thing, you know, and that,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know, because I mentioned the lesbian gay thing and that sexual orientation, and I don't know, there's a lot of shame there around the sex part.
What do you want to say to people that are struggling with all of that shame around it? Because I think you're like getting to a point there. I mean, the point is you shouldn't have to feel that way, right? Like that's a part of you.
Right.
It's not right. Go ahead.
Right. Yeah, it's just a natural, like, being sexual is a natural human instinct. And I'm not talking about like we should go out and be promiscuous with everyone. That's not what I'm talking about. But
Right.
just that there's natural things as being a sexual being. It's part of our makeup, you know, and that it's not something that we want to be ashamed about. And because that anytime that we have shame about anything, body image, our sexual orientation, or just our sexuality, or our belief systems, any kind of shame around all of that, just it's a way to control us.
Right.
It's a way to control us. I mentioned this on a prior video when we were talking about perfectionism, right? That we can be leveraged by these things, and it's a way to control us so that we will conform. And that is what I don't want. Like, I want you to conform to you.
Yeah.
And so, you know, that's what this message is all about.
Yeah.
Conformity, true to yourself.
I think that's beautiful. I feel like some religions have a tendency to say, you are poison and we have the antidote. Like you said, it is a
Right.
way to kind of control you in some respects. And I don't like that. I don't like that the Mormon church and like some of the others we've mentioned have this attitude of like, you're born evil and bad and like you need us in order to be good. Because if you look at humanity in
Right.
general, like most human beings are born with the ability to be sympathetic. And because of that, we generally want to do good to other people because we don't want bad things done to us. It's like the golden rule, right? And I feel like that is our nature. And for a church or an organization or anyone to tell you differently, that you are not born good, that you are actually born bad, it's just sad, you know? Like it is. At least, I mean, that's my view of it right now, honestly. And again, we're not here to say like religion is bad or whatever. Like, we're just here to point out the importance of loving and trusting yourself and, you know, letting go of what doesn't resonate with you. Because I have a lot of really close friends right now that are Mormon, and I absolutely love and respect them. I will always love Mormonism because it was always the first thing I knew. Even though I feel like I have issues with it, I will always love it. And I think that you can be Mormon and be happy and love yourself. I think you just have to let go of a lot of the stereotypes that are taught, unfortunately, incorrectly, you know. And I think it's born out of good intention. I think people in churches and stuff are generally trying to teach you good. They're trying to do good, and you just it just gets.
Morgan, you know what came to me? I don't know why this is popping up. You might want to edit this out. But I remember at the retreat last fall, and I had that idea when you were talking about your religion and everything, about the Mormon religion. It's not all bad, right? And we definitely don't want to talk about it as being all bad, because that's absolutely not true. It creates beautiful, loving communities and families that are very supportive of each other and of each families and stuff. And so I think the thought was, what if you became a leader that could revamp the Mormon church? Do you remember that?
Yes, I remember that. That was one thought that that was my first thought before leaving the church. I thought, I'm going to fix it. I'm going to fix the church. I'm going to make it like, I'm going to like start speaking up more in Relief Society and saying things that like, I remember us talking
Yeah.
about that. That was before I really tanked.
And who knows? And who knows though? I mean, like maybe somebody will get the message and they can make a church that's a beautiful church into a much more robust and sustainable church that people can come to, and they can go to the temple whether they have sinned or not, right? That they, you know, it's about all inclusivity. Who knows? I don't know where it will go, but it just feels like a church is needed where there's not that ever constant threat of not performing, of not, if you don't do a certain thing, you won't get to heaven, or you won't get to a certain level of heaven. And so
I remember trying to explain to you the 3 heavens and then the 3 levels inside the top.
right.
It just feels funny to try to explain it. But like, I don't know. It sounds so complicated. But hey, we'll find out, right? You and I, we're going to be in the telestial, maybe the terrestrial, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
And supposedly that's way happier than Earth already, so I guess that's not too bad.
Oh, well. No, I think Earth's pretty great.
There you go. Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that's probably a good place to end. Do you have any other thoughts?
No, just that, I love you. And I just think that, what you're doing here to support this community that is transitioning in their faith is such vital work. And I just want to encourage you to continue to be strong, to be faithful to yourself. And and you're going to change a lot of lives in a positive way.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me on your channel.
Yeah, well, and thank you for saying all that. See, you guys, Angie's got the inside scoop on me because I tell her just about everything. And so she knows how hard this has been. So thank you for your encouragement. I really appreciate that.
It's so journey for you, Morgan. But again, just because I'm objective here, and I just want to say, Morgan cares about you so deeply. She really does. Like, she's so invested in who you are and in your happiness and in freeing yourself from these entrapped beliefs. I don't know if you guys realize how much she cares, but so I mean that from the bottom of my heart.
Thank you. Oh my gosh, you're gonna make me cry. I don't know if I've cried on this channel yet, but it's a ticking time bomb. Like, that's all it is. Like, I'm a crier. I was one of those sacrament meeting sobbers that there's a word for it, I forget, but it's like a joke, because like at church, you get up there in front of sacrament meeting and they'll just like sob and you can't even understand what they're saying. That was me, guys. That was me. True blue, TBM. Anyway, okay, so thank you so much, Angie, for everything you said. And my heart. Okay, so last, I did want to let you guys know that this week me and Angie are doing a live interactive class specifically for ex-Mormons and anyone else transitioning out of their faith. And the class is going to be called What to Expect During Your Faith Transition and 3 Pitfalls to Avoid. We're really excited to put this class together for you guys live, because I'll actually get to see some of you and hear some of your stories. And the purpose of this class, I really just want to give you guys a little bit of a roadmap. When I left the church, I felt so alone and afraid, and I was like, I don't have the answers, and no one has the answers, and I was scared. And so I want to help you guys know what to expect so that you can handle your transition better than what I did. But I mean, even so, I think I've handled it better than some as well, since I've had great help like Angie and other people. So anyway, that's going to be this Wednesday at 3 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. And it'll be super fun. Thank you guys so much for watching this video today. Angie, thank you for being here, for all your time and your expertise. I always love everything you have to say, and I am just so grateful that I could finally have you on my channel. And guys, please comment below any of your thoughts about what we talked about in the video today. And don't forget to like and subscribe. And we will see you guys in the next video. Bye.
Bye.